For 27 years, I believe Jehovah's Witnesses had the truth. I don't anymore, and leaving cost me almost everything. But I would say that it has been worth it. And here's the reason why. Now, before I go any further, I just want to say I'm not going to be bashing any witness beliefs. At least I'm not going to be going too in depth in this video. Really, this is not about being hateful or anything like that. I love everyone in the organization. I mean, most of my family and my friends are still in the organization. So there's no ill will there, and this isn't coming from an angry or hateful place whatsoever. That said, I hope that maybe my experience could help someone else who might be in a similar spot. I was born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness. For 27 years, that's really all I knew. And overall, I had a good experience, I would say. My family, they were pretty good witnesses. We were pretty good witnesses. My dad was an elder. My mom was a regular pioneer. I regular pioneered for almost a year. So that, that's putting 70 hours a month in every month, going door to door in the ministry. Still, probably what stood out from my childhood and what ended up turning into a problem later on in my life, if a problem as in if I wanted to stay a witness, was that my parents always taught us that there was nothing wrong with asking questions and that it was good to think critically about things. I don't think they envisioned where that would lead, but it definitely planted the seeds of it's okay to think about things. It's okay to ask questions. And that kind of led to eventually, when I was 27 years old, COVID had just started. And there was a few things that kind of triggered me starting to think about everything a little bit more. And for one, my brother was starting to ask some questions. COVID was kind of just a big time, I think, for a lot of people to rethink some things in their lives. I was going to be becoming a father soon. My grandfather had just passed, so I had some questions of mortality and things like that kicking around. So it was really just a time for reflection, a time for processing a lot of that. And it was a time for me, I decided to take some of the time I had on my hands to study deeper than I really ever had in my entire life. I spent hours and hours every day studying. And I will say I really didn't know my beliefs as a witness anywhere near as well as I thought I did up until that point. And that's probably true for a lot of people who have left. You believe a lot of things, but you don't actually know in depth really what you believe. So that led to me stopping. I didn't attend meetings anymore, stopped going in service. And that obviously raised some red flags with the elders. Also, I was having dialogues with them. They were asking me what was going on. And, I had no problem sharing it. At this point, I wasn't committed to leaving or anything like that. I was just asking questions because in my mind, I didn't want to leave. I had all my family, all my friends, my wife's family, who we were very close to. Everyone was bought in, active, a witness. And so I knew what this would do. And I didn't want to hurt anyone. And selfishly, I didn't want to blow up my own life. So all of that was kind of running through my head. But as anyone who's kind of been through this before knows, it starts with asking questions, and maybe the elders or whoever you're talking to says, yeah, it's okay to ask questions. It's good to ask questions. But there kind of becomes a question limit, so to speak. Question it once, question it twice, you're okay. Maybe you're still coming from a genuine place. But if you don't accept the answer fairly quickly, if you keep asking, well, now all of a sudden you're being negative, and you might even be getting into apostate territory. Where are you getting these questions from? Why are you asking these questions? So that started to become what was being said to me. And along with that was, even though we would go into depth on a few different topics, and maybe in a future video, I'll get more in depth into what these topics were that really jumped out for me. But the takeaway from the elders would be, well, just come back to meetings. Come back to meetings. Go back in service again. That's what you need to do. And honestly, on the one hand, I could see how their rationale, maybe it could work. If you surround yourself with people who you like and you just get busy and you don't think as much about the things that you've been questioning, if you kind of shut off your mind a little bit on those topics, then yeah, maybe you could fall back into things, at least for a little while. But personally, I knew that wouldn't work for me long term. And I also knew I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted to pursue the truth. And that's something that's kind of led me through this whole process, is that you should be able to test truth. To make a claim like, we have the truth. That is a bold claim. And I think growing up as a witness, probably many of us, we didn't really appreciate how bold of a claim that was. We would just kind of say it shorthand for the religion that we were in. We would say it to each other all the time, right? Oh, that person's not in the truth. Oh, we have the truth. But what does that really mean? Well, when you say you have the truth, you're dismissing everything else. And if you're going to do that, then you should be able to test it. You should be able to put arguments up against it, and it should come out on top. And so I knew as I was going deeper and deeper into things and pursuing truth, I knew it would come with a cost. You know, Jesus said that he came not to bring peace on earth, but to divide even a family, because the truth can be divisive. He also said that his followers would have to take up their cross and follow him. So I knew that it could be hard, but I honestly didn't want to hurt anyone I cared about. It was also causing a lot of turmoil in my marriage at the time. So this was something that I was kind of pushing off as far as I could. And I just kept studying. But the more I learned, the more I realized that I couldn't continue as a witness, at least not for very long. So that was a painful process, because it meant when I ultimately made the decision, I lost all my family, or almost all of my family. I lost all my friends, probably forever. So that was the hardest part, and it remains the hardest part still, even 5 years later. You know, I think about all the people who I knew in the religion, some friends that I had for years, you know, a decade, a good chunk of my life. People who I was in their wedding party, they were in mine. These were close relationships, but they're essentially gone. And I hold out hope for the future, you never know. But that has for sure been the hardest part, and I think a lot of people who have left know all too well what that's like. But I've also heard it said recently that pain plus reflection equals progress. And so reflecting on the pain of certain decisions and results in your life can lead you to make progress in other ways. And I've seen the fruits of my decision, the positive fruits, in my family, in my faith. So that's really the question now, is where has it left me? Unfortunately, many people leave the witness organization and they leave their faith. They become agnostic. They become very secular. That has not been me at all. I am stronger in my faith now than I ever have been in my entire life. And so my hope is that anyone who's in a similar spot, you know, there's differences in everyone's story, but maybe you're coming from a similar place where maybe you have questions, doubts, or maybe you have already left and you're not sure what is next. You don't know if religion or faith, the Bible, you don't know if any of those things are worth pursuing anymore because you've had a bad experience. I understand that. And I hope anyone who's curious will benefit from this, but those people especially I want to speak to and try to give an off-ramp so that it's not just witnesses or nothing. There are other options out there. And so in future videos, I'll dive into that more. But for now, I just wanted to give a brief introduction of myself and my story. I hope this is helpful in some way. And if you enjoyed it, I hope you'll like, subscribe, and stay tuned for future videos. God bless.